Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times, these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
My name is Terry Dale Hohn. I'm 64, getting ready to turn 65 in July, and I retired as a line battalion chief. Yes, Larry, I am from the Greensboro area. I was born and raised in Greensboro, and actually I was born at the old Wesley Long Hospital, so lived in Greensboro my whole life up until later on, and then moved out into the Guilford County part of the. I am related to Charlie Jones. We're first cousins, and then his boys came on later on. And so that's, as far as I know, that's the only relationship that we had there on the fire department. I thought about wanting to be a firefighter for, I guess, growing up as a kid. I remember putting like a pair of boots, maybe a pair of pants beside my bed, and waking up and just playing like I was a firefighter, like a fireman. And I always thought that was pretty cool, but I really never had no ambition or to being a firefighter. And there again, Charlie, I knew that he was on and talked to him a little bit about it. We had a neighbor at one time, Captain Jack Rich, and I would see him come home. His mother lived next door to us there on Pinecroft, and he would come in off shift, and I'd see him, and we'd talk a little bit. I was just a youngster then, and so never really had no aspiration. I always liked people, loved being around people, and just kind of, fell into putting an application and going from there. So the process that we went through, we took a silver service exam, and we took that after putting in an application, and then we kind of waited, and then I remember Robert Carman, Captain Carman, came out to our house, and Dad and I was in the backyard pitting on some machinery or working, and I saw the fire car drive up, and Captain Carman got out in his blues, and I figured, something was up then. So he came there and kind of done an interview with my dad out there in the yard, and talked to my mom, talked to me a little bit, and so that's kind of how the process started. And then we went from there. He said, we'll be back in touch with you, and they did. And then I had a interview. And at that time, Chief Kent, Reese Kent, was a deputy chief, and he actually done my first interview. And so we went through an interview process. And I'll never forget kind of a side story. At the very end of our interview, Chief Kent looked at me and he said, is there something wrong with your eyes? And I said, no, sir, not that I know of. And so I thought that was kind of odd. I left there with that question, why? So I got home, and the more I thought about it, I said, I'm just going to call. I wonder if I can call, the deputy chief of Greensboro, and here I am, just, a 20-year-old, 19-year-old kid. But I did call him, and he actually talked to me, and we talked over the phone, and we talked about some other things as well. But and I asked him, and he said that he didn't mean anything by it. It was just that I think he thought that maybe I had something maybe in my eye, and I was having a little bit of trouble with it, maybe an eyelash. So So that was kind of unique within itself. The starting salary, Larry, I guess I've got a different spin on this. I didn't join the fire department to make money. I don't really remember, for some reason, $300 sticks in my mind. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was more than what I was making doing the work that I was doing. And even through the years of the fire department, yeah, I appreciated the money, I appreciated the raises and worked hard for it, and the schools and all that, but I never did really keep up or pay attention to what I made and what I was making. But I could talk a whole lot about that too, but no, I really don't remember exactly what my first paychecks and what we were making when we came on.
Okay.
Yeah, the people that were in our class and training, I came on March the 1st, 1979, and it was 20 recruits that was in the class. And some of them that come to mind is Bob Nugent was in our class, Chuck Stockard, Stan Stafford, Gary Hoogland, Tim Patterson, Tyre Miner, Chris Herbin, Milton Moore, and then we had the 3 young ladies that was on our class too, was Anita Strong and Walls and Kathy Smith. And so I can't remember everybody, but that's the ones that kind of come to mind. Yeah, and training was fun. We enjoyed it. I think that our training chief officer was Chief Hagler, and then Robert Carmen was the captain. And the way that our training went, they asked several captains to come in and take like ladders or ropes or pumps, hydraulics. And you were actually one of them, Larry, and that taught one of our classes. And Randy Parrish, Roger Collis, Johnny Teeters, they were some that actually helped us with our class. But there was a story that kind of stuck out. We would get back from lunch and we'd go out and throw football, or waiting for the class to start back and hanging out like that. But I injured one of my fingers out there. And I remember coming back into the classroom, golly, 20 years old, I was just scared to death. So we decided not to say anything, the ones we was out there horsing around or playing. So probably shouldn't have been. But I did injure one of my fingers, so we were going to hide it and all. Well, the word got back to Chief Hagler that I had injured my finger. Somehow or another it got back to him. Well, he called me in his office later on that afternoon. I said, "This is it. I'm done for." But I'll never forget, he took my finger, didn't say a whole lot about it, and put a splint on it and wrapped it up. And he said, "Do the best you can." And I'll never forget that he stepped up. And here it is, a chief officer, had injured my finger, but made it through a couple of weeks with that injured finger and never was said much about it. So, well, doing something special, I guess, wow, what an honor to me that it was just to say that you were a firefighter, period. And I guess that would go along the lines of kind of what you were proud of. Riding on that tailboard, coming back from fires, which back in the day, with the open cabs, would have hose rolled up and we'd put it on the back of the tailboard so you could get back to the station, to clean it. The biggest thing, you had to make sure that your strap was tied down tight, or you'd lose your helmet, and you didn't want to do that. So, but riding on the back of that tailboard, it was a very prideful feeling, knowing that you were a part of that, and that that you were out there making a difference, and that you were a firefighter in Greensboro City, and that was a very special time.
Okay.
Yes, my first assignment was at Station 10. At the time it was Truck 10. I did spend a couple of days, and it's a vague memory, but I do remember at Central Station. They needed some help for a couple of days, and I went there for just a very short time, but then my assignment was at Station 10, there on Truck 10. And my first captain was Ron Murphy, and Ron was there, and on the engine was Al Stewart. So that was my very first assignment there at Station 10, right out of recruit school. And I remember when we graduated, some of us had to go to work, that evening, and the rest came on the next shift just because of the 24-hour shift, the way that we worked. But I actually went on that evening and went straight to work. No, not really no nicknames. Most of the time I was called TD, my initials. That kind of carried on through the fire department. So it was either just TD or Captain TD or Chief TD or whatever. So a lot of them called me that, the guys and the people that I worked closely with. Yeah, and I'm smiling, I'm starting to laugh. You just start thinking about it. Were there pranks that I was involved in, or did we do? Yes. And it was just about in every shift, everyday thing. Wow, how much time do you got, to talk about all the pranks? A couple that come to mind was at Station 8, and it was with Danny Shoemate. He was a captain. Charlie Jones was the driver, and Jay Campbell, Jim Wallen, a couple of us there, together at Station 8. And we picked and played. We trained hard, worked hard, but we played and had so much fun and so much laughter. It was something going on all the time. But we really picked on Charlie a whole lot. And Charlie was on edge, skittish. We made him worse than what he really was, because we would set him up. Captain Shoemate Danny would go back at the door, which was all glass doors at the back of the station, and we'd set this up. Danny just take Charlie back there and be talking to him in a conversation, and I would run by the window real quick and just get Charlie real involved in the conversation. I'm gonna run by the window on the outside and scare Charlie. So I would do that. We'd set Charlie up. I'd come running by and it'd startle, scare Charlie. And we always told Charlie that he spoke in a different language whenever he got scared. And so many times Jay and I would get together, and Danny was right there with us too, that I would go hide in Charlie's locker, and they would send Charlie to his locker to get something. And I'd be all inside of his locker. He'd open up the door, and I'd blah, out and scare him. So we've done a whole lot of stuff like that, scaring each other and playing. As far as cooking at the station, we did. That was part of our time to fellowship, to socialize, to there again make fun of each other's cooking. A lot of it hit the trash can early in the years, when you were learning and all that. So we did cook a whole lot, just about every meal back in the day. And you go to the grocery store and take your grocery store list with you and get your groceries. And the downside of that was, and I hated it, if you would be in the grocery store, which most time would be right down the road, you'd see the engine or the truck going by or going on a call. You'd miss the call from being at the grocery store. I always hated that part. And so, but we did eat together, and that was such a time of, whether we were talking about training, or we'd come back to eat after missing a meal and it'd be late, or we'd leave the food sitting there and it'd be cold. You'd warm it up when you get back. But it would be a time for us to talk about the cause and, to learn from it and to fellowship. Such an important time, even a part of my career of learning. I always remember this saying, whether I was a good cook or not, I don't know, you might need to ask some of the other guys. I enjoyed cooking. It was fun. But I remember Ron Murphy telling me this, and it might have been O.C. Johnson too. I had him later on, that was a great captain as well. But he said, learn one meal that you can cook and perfect that. And it was usually like something, spaghetti or a baked ham or something, like that. But I guess over the years, your menu spread, and you got bigger and bigger. And actually I got where I enjoyed cooking, enjoyed grilling, and actually later on the years done a lot of grilling for fire department functions. The advantage and disadvantage of having cubicles versus dormitories in the fire station, hands down, the dormitories. And I experienced both. Younger in the days, wow, dormitories is where we had that, I guess you say, the informal leader, as far as your drivers, your second drivers, your tenure firefighters, and what a learning experience there too. I mean, a lot of picking, a lot of playing, a lot of late nights when you were sleepy and tired and you wanted to go to sleep, but everybody else wasn't ready to. And so TV usually blaring and it was on. But just the opportunity to become closer to your fellow firefighters and the ones that you rode the truck on. You know, we discussed and talked about problems that we had, or things we needed to fix, or to better ourselves as a person, or to better ourselves as a firefighter, and just the fun that we had and the jokes that we played on each other, and so much was learned and was contributed to who I am and what I was as a firefighter. I actually started that informal relationships, you know, in the dormitory back there in the bedroom. And I say that I experienced the other, just having the single place to sleep. And I think that I felt that the most after I was promoted as a captain, that I was pulled away from that dormitory. Now, here I am in a room all by myself, or sharing it with just one other captain. And just the quietness and the not as much the conversation, not the playing, the picking, coming back from the calls, you know, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and laying there geared up from the call, or second guessing yourself on what took place and what you done on the call, and getting that reassurance from your fellow firefighters, or discussing it so we could move on to the next call. It was just awesome. I don't think that the firefighters do spend as much time together, even off duty, or really at the station, which is, in my eyes, is kind of sad. But I also know that it's a, you know, different generation, and people view and look and think of different things, and act different, or are different. And it's just because I think of the different generations that's come along, like the difference of not having the dormitory life that we lived. Having those tailboard talks, sitting on the back of the tailboard. Wow, what a training session that we had just on the tailboard, or sitting out front in the old reclined back metal chairs that we had at the stations, sitting out front and having talks out there, and there again learning or talking or taking that building down the road and, you know, looking at it and discussing what we would do if that one, you know, would start burning or smoke showing or whatever. But it is different, but I think it contributes to, like all of us, we all have cell phones now, and that's where all your information comes from. That's where your contacts are. That's who you talk to. And that was really a transition for me in my time, because, you know, whenever we first come on, we had maybe a bag phone or a flip phone, you know, that we had with us, but cell phones wasn't that popular then. So I think that really changed. And I'll tell you an example of that, Larry, right quick, is I was a chief officer at the time, and I met a company out for lunch. And we were sitting there at lunch, and it kind of caught my eye. I was around the table of about 6 or 8 firefighters, and I noticed it was kind of quiet. And I got to looking, well, everybody was on their cell phone. Whether, you know, downtown, getting caught up with your family, friend, communicating. And I did notice that, and I actually made light of it, made fun of it, you know, made a joke out of it. And it was all in fun. But I did notice that, you know, the cell phones have a lot to do with it, I think, nowadays. Well, I think it's important when, as retirees, whenever we come by a fire station, for the firefighters to have conversation with us. I did learn one thing. Young firefighters or other firefighters really don't want to hear a lot about what you did. Seems that way. Now, if it's something that they can learn from it, which I think is very important, is good. And the times that I've been by the station and have had the opportunity, and it's so neat that they make you feel welcome, and they make you feel, you know, worthy, I guess, because I think a lot of times as a retiree that you've lost a little bit of that, you know, like you're not needed no more, you're not appreciated, because we felt that so much through our career, and that's kind of what kept you going. You know, you were giving back and giving back and giving back. But I think that visiting those stations, it's really cool that if you do have some of the youngs that do want to have some of those stories, not to get into the particulars or to get too deep into it, but something that they can take from it, something they can learn from it, I think is very important, and seems to be important to them as well. I remember riding on the truck, and it was a CPR call, and it was one of my first ones. I don't think it was the first one, but I remembered that it was a working CPR. And you know, back then, we had the bag mask, and we also done mouth to mouth. And I'll never forget, and I don't want to get too gross here, get too much into it, but it was a young lady, alcoholic, she had coded. And I'll never forget going in, and we went through all the prep to come up, yes, she's lifeless. And I'll never forget, and Andy McFarland, he was on engine 10, and he looked at me and he said, well, I'm going to take the chest. I guess you're going to take the head. And, you know, that's just the way we communicated then to whenever we went to work with CPR. So I remember breathing her, and you did do mouth to mouth, and then she ended up getting sick and throwing up, and, you know, you would just wipe that out of the way and keep getting it. So that was a tough thing to do, a hard time, but golly, we didn't miss a beat. And we kept trying to revive her. And I remember that really stuck in my mind, you know, as a young firefighter, that whatever it takes, you know, that's what we're there to do. We're there to help. We're there to make a difference. And that's what we were trying to do. Well, the value in running the medical calls, and what always stuck out in our mind, and even to today, is because of our stations being geographically put out into the battalions or throughout the whole city, and it comes down to response time. Because, you know, with a medical call, whenever it's very life-threatening or maybe not, but it's just getting there in the time frame that we can get there. A lot of times, most of the time, we were there before, you know, the EMS got there. And we would already have initiated the first responders and doing what we needed to do. And I think even to this day, I think it's a very important part of the fire service, is giving that medical attention to the community. Mentors in my life on the career, during my career, it's so many, and I guess I would go back and even starting, you know, in training, you know, for sure Chief Hagler, Captain Carman, for sure, because that's where I learned my roots, and then Captain Murphy and Captain O.C. Johnson there on the truck, and what I learned from them as captains, and, you know, Al Stewart. And then as I moved to different stations, there at Station 7, Captain Shoemade and Captain Nix, Captain Price, you know, the captains that were there on the engine. And, you know, back then the captains rotated shifts, and, you know, if I remember right, like the captains moved forward, the battalion chiefs moved backwards to have different officers while he was there at the station. And Captain David Sharp was there at 8, and just for what they brought to the table and taught me as a youngster. And I specifically remember Danny Shoemate, not only tactics, and it was just life within itself. And, you know, when were you going to start a family? And when you went on vacation, what preparations did you make to go on vacation, and, you know, for the safety of your family? And I just remember some of those things that, you know, Danny taught us just as a person, you know, there in the station. So I really started out at a young person, respecting, you know, Danny for his views on life and for what he brought, even, you know, outside of the station. We were there with, you know, the battalion chief, Chief Parker. Wow, as far as tactics and learning firefighting, and I mentioned earlier about sitting out in front of the fire station on the tailboard. So many times, Chief Parker was never hesitant to coming down to the ranks and talking. And we would sit out there together in front of Station 8, and there again, he would say, well, Hohn, what would you do if that church down there, if you saw smoke down there? And I just get to thinking, he said, what if it was black smoke, or what if it was more of a gray smoke, or what if it was really pushing out? Learn how the emphasis on reading smoke and seeing that difference. I mean, it was all out there in front of the station, very informal training. So Chief Brad Cox was an inspiration to me and a mentor, kept pushing me through promotions. And Larry, it took me like 6 times on the captain's test to get past the captain's test. And every one I fell short on. You know, it was several that motivated me and kept me going, but Chief Cox always, you know, encouraged me and, you know, talked to me and kind of kept me going. And he was one of many. And, you know, some of the older guys like Captain Shepard, Donnie Varner, all those older guys that, you know, to talk about firefighting, it just come so natural to them and learning so much from them. And then Charlie Jones, wow, you know, he was such a brother to me and helped me so much. You know, Charlie and I worked real closely there together. Golly, we fought and played, and the mentor he was that, you know, we spent a lot of time there at Station 8. I was a second driver on the back of Engine 8, and Charlie was a driver, but just there again, those informal conversations in the bedroom and on the tailboard, and the encouragement I always got from him, and talking about the calls whenever we got back. And then over at Station 7, whenever I went over to Station 7 to drive, you know, Woody Parrish and Chuck Smith, and the way that the down and dirty firefighter, and working the east side and coming in the downtown, and learning so much from them of, you know, the firefighter tactics and all the different operations, engine operations and truck operations. And I have to say too, you know, Chief Spears, David Spears, what a mentor he was through the years. And I remember it's several things that David taught me and through the years, but as far as driving and being safe, responding in a vehicle, whether it was a apparatus or the chief's car or what, I always remember David saying, you know, pick out each lane before you go through the intersection. You know, watch each lane instead of just doing a overall tunnel vision type of look. And I remember that from him. And there's one more, just real quick. Chief Flowers, back in the day, he was a battalion chief. I was at Engine 8. And this turns into kind of a funny short story, but Chief Flowers, we drove the battalion chief at night, and which was pretty cool because you got that relationship one-on-one conversation with the battalion chief, which I thought that was neat. But we were going on a call, going up High Point Road. We got the Merritt Drive right there, and the light changed. Well, Chief Flowers said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and I thought he said, "Go, go, go." So I punched it, you know, in an old Crown Vic through the intersection. Well, he kind of lit into me a little bit, chewed on me some for doing that. Well, it was a misunderstanding, but it turned into a funny story. But Chief Flowers was laid back, easygoing, and I always enjoyed the way that he was and the way that he mentored me as well. I think the biggest change that's changed in the fire department from the time I started till the time that I retired is, I think it was the discipline and the accountability. And not in a bad way, I don't guess, but in such a different way. I know as a captain and as a battalion chief, if needed, you know, you could discipline and you could take care of the little things that would turn into maybe bigger things later. And you would try your best to handle it, you know, in the best nature that you could, or to the welfare of the employee, to making sure that they understood or it was corrected, or to help them out with their future, or to make things kind of right. You know, you were able to take care of things. I know that later in my career, later on in those years, the very late years, that was kind of taken away from us, and which was fine. I mean, it was, I guess, for the betterment of the city and maybe for the better of the department. There again, the changes of ways, changes of times that, you know, HR started stepping in and doing discipline and taking care of situations. But to me, in the day, we could have headed some of that off and took care of it, before it escalated and made it to the HR. So just seeing that difference there and kind of the discipline side of it, and I'm sure that it's fine now, I'm sure that it's working fine, but just what more that we were used to as officers and holding personnel accountable for stuff, I think it made a big difference with how we operated and what we done. Some of my heartbreaking moments on the fire department, when we would run a call and it would be on a holiday, and especially, I guess, Christmas, and even working Thanksgiving, we worked, if you pulled a shift on that holiday, the hardest one to work was, I think, Thanksgiving. You never got that day back. If you worked Christmas, we would get Christmas Eve back. But I remember on Christmas responding to a call, and it was a working fire, and the family lost all their gifts. They lost their tree, and just witnessing that, and with their children and kids around, and that was hard, and that was younger in my career, and hard witnessing that, hard seeing that. So many calls, seeing the loss of property, but the loss of life. I think the hardest thing for me, and after talking to other firefighters, when we would lose a elderly person or a very young child, I think that was maybe the hardest thing to deal with, to cope with, to talk through, whether it was a 1050, a wreck out, or whether it was a burn victim, or whether it was a working CPR where we couldn't get them back. I think like I said, the older people and the younger people, I think all of them were hard, but the hardest was, I think dealing with that. We also, I've always loved animals, and a lot of times whenever you get there, the occupants would say, well, my cat's right inside, or I've got a dog inside, and can you get them out, or can you see if you can find them? And a lot of times we did, but a lot of times it was too late. And I remember that we responded on a call on a manual road, and working house fire, and sure enough, the couple came out and said they had a dog inside with puppies. And so I'll never forget that we went inside, and we were able to get a couple of puppies, but it was too late for the mom and some of the other puppies. So just being an animal lover like we are, and golly, that was part of the rescue. We took it very serious. That sometimes that was tough. Well, the campus walk fire definitely was one of the hardest responses in my career. And the call came in way up in the early hours in the morning, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And it came in, I remember the communications telling us that it was a possibly fire on one of the balconies, or a grill that was on the balcony. So I was a captain. I was on Engine 8, South Chapman Street. And when we turned the corner, we saw the glow in the sky. So we knew it was more than just a grill, just a balcony fire. So it was a glow in the sky. And we arrived, first engine on the scene. And Larry, it was probably some of the most fire that I'd ever seen, I guess probably for the biggest part of my career. And the whole center of the building, it was an apartment complex, 3 stories, apartment complex, and the whole center of the stairwell was just fully involved. So Engine 8, we laid in, and I remember either giving the order, or Keith Collins, being the heck of a firefighter that he is, our first hose line was a 2.5. Big hose, big water is what we was thinking. So they went ahead and started pulling that off, and Chris Johnson was driving, and I remember Matt Reed and Keith Collins was on the engine, and at the time we'd switch from squad to rescue. And Bobby Lynn Coley was on the rescue, and Brian Wells if I remember correctly. So they were there. So we went to work pulling lines and advancing those lines. Well, during my walk around, made it back around, and all of a sudden we heard, screams and hollering from obviously victims, and it was just so much black smoke. And we were on the D side, which in our world, if you're facing the apartment or facing the structure, the D side is the right side of the structure. And so it was kind of down in a low lying part of the area, and the parking lot. Cars were on fire. Vehicles were burning from the extreme heat. We had fire going into the woods headed toward other buildings. So it was total chaos from the start. But we went to work. We knew that we had rescue. I think that one of my first directives or orders, or however you want to say it, was for ladders, to ladder the building. Because we knew at that time of night that we were going to have rescues. And by that time, yes, people were screaming and hollering, trying to jump, hanging from the upper levels, upper part of the windows. And one dropped to Keith Collins was standing there, and it knocked his helmet off. And after talking to Keith about that just here recently, and tried to catch that one person. And I remembered another young lady was hanging from the upper windows, and just black smoke rolling out, and trying to tell her to wait. Ladders were coming, and said she couldn't, and so she dropped, and it was just like she was just laid right in my arms, and it was just crazy how that happened. And I remembered thinking that after, she dropped and I called her, I just had to run to the engine. It was like I had to get her to a safe place, and just a reaction. But I remembered running with her and how warm she felt, not burning to me because full turnout gear and gloves, but I remembered how warm she felt through my gloves from being so hot from up there at the fire and the smoke. So I was able to get her up there to the tailboard and to the side with Chris Johnson, and EMS was there. And I knew I had to get back because we had so much other stuff going on, and there was other victims and subjects dropping to the ground, and other people dropping, and even in the other sectors with 5 and 10 and other companies there, they were dealing with the same things. But on our side, we had fire that was breaking out and rolling through the woods to other apartments, so we wired off to 1.5 inch and 3/4 lines and was knocking that down. But after we got some of the fire knocked down, we kept knowing that we needed to advance inside to check for other victims. And I remember that Coley and some of them and Keith were moving the ladders down, and each window we would try to go in. It was just fully involved, and the heat was just backing us down. So we eventually got over to, I think, to a 3rd-story window, and was able to make entry. And we made entry into those windows. And I think this was like the 2nd round of our air packs. And so we made entry, and we were just fighting fire like crazy, and in search and wanting to make rescues, and knowing people were maybe still there. And we kept searching and fighting fire, and we noticed that the floor was getting a little bit softer as we came further in, and it was because of the seat of the fire and where it all started, and we didn't know at the time that all the stairwell was burned out in the center and all that was gone. And so we were fighting fire and still searching, and then the fire got up behind us a little bit, so we had to fight fire to get back out. By that time, Chief Underwood was the battalion chief, one of them that was there, and he was in command, and he had asked for us to, come out. He saw that it was getting to be too much and looking too bad on the outside, which, great eyes on the outside for us for being inside and not seeing that. And I remember Chief Johnson told us later that having a deluge on top of the engine, which is a deck gun, it's a big gun to throw large amounts of water, and he initiated that and put that on the seat of the fire. But I think he told us one time he didn't know if he would see us again because we hadn't came out yet. And so thank you for Chris for doing that and for stepping up and putting that on the seat of the fire. So that was going on at the same time. But I remember asking Chief Underwood, when you're inside, you always want those extra minutes, and you always ask for more, because a lot of times you don't realize it's really as bad as what it is. But even knowing the floor was soft, but we could get away from that part, and trying to knock the fire down, searching out rooms, we were, ordered to come out, and we bailed back out on the ladders, and finally got most of the fire knocked down. Ended up going I think, defensive for offensive attempts and knocking those fires down. And
when did you realize you had 4 victims?
We didn't realize it, that the 4 victims were there. Overhaul was going on, cleanup, going back in. We didn't know that we had those 4 victims until later on into the call, and which was very, very devastating. How did we deal with losing those victims? That night, that early morning, it was hard, it was tough. You start going over all your tactics, all your offensive aggressiveness, and questioning yourself, and decisions that were made, and all that's going through your mind of wanting to do more, and coming up feeling kind of defeated, like you came up short, a little bit, or a great deal by not being able to get to those 4 victims. But I guess thinking of the intensity of the fire and all what was going on, and the way the fire had advanced way before that we even arrived on the scene was very critical. But the way that we dealt with it was with each other. Having each other back at the station, knowing that you had brothers. We had the whole building surrounded and people inside and working, and even after the fact of overhauling, having all your brothers there and talking and supporting each other. And I mean, from the commanders, battalion chiefs, all down to the other captains, other drivers, firefighters, just being there for each other. And I know, Larry, you came in later that morning, and taking over, and y'all having to talk to the families and dealing with all that. Can't imagine how hard and how tough that was. But to deal with it as well, I don't think we had it in place at the time. It was something new to us, the critical incident debriefing, if I'm not short of saying exactly what we called that. But I think that was it. We were offered that, and we did have some of that there at Station 8, kind of informally, and I think it probably helped more than you realized at the time. Still carry it today, still think about it today, thinking about, wish we could have done something different to make a bigger impact, bigger difference there. And yes, there were rescues made. Yes, we did rescue victims. Yeah, sure, we did. And out of 30-some occupants there, whether it was fully occupied for that night, I'm not sure, but and the structure, the integrity of the building, of what it did hold up, so we could make those rescues, I think was awesome. But like I said, the biggest thing, I think, having each other, talking to other companies that were there, talking about it, discussing it, I think that's what made the biggest difference. And we kept telling each other after a day or two, and I say a day or two of a couple of shifts, this wasn't the end. we had to move on. Because, you know, we didn't know when the bell would hit again. And we didn't know, you know, when the next call, so we would be prepared. And so it's still hard.
You never forget those.
No, you don't forget them, and I think that's just, you know, some of the memories, and you know, that would bring back those times. Yeah, I think when you do develop that hardness and that toughness and that, you know, of helped you survive at times, but I think you do develop later on in the years that more empathy, or the caring and the softness, you know, but you can see it here. I think so, because I think I cry easier now more than I ever have in my life. And, you know, depending on, you know, the situation, and, you know, you have, your family's grown up, you have grandchildren, you look at things different, and it is different. And, you know, you appreciate, you know, the heart of the people that you work with. You appreciate the givingness and the tenderness and that brotherhood. And I think it does, and I know it did me. It has softened me up quite a bit. Did it make me a better man? In the end, sure it did. Yeah, it did, by hands down. I feel like that over the years that, you know, I grew up with the fire department, you know, mentally, physically. It was a growing time, a learning time, and golly, I'd do it all over again. Hopefully, and I feel like it did, that my career with the fire department has carried over, you know, into my life now, and the person that I am now. And I contribute the fire department, the ups and downs, the time shared, the conversation, the people. And that was the thing, you know, about this interview. I didn't want it to be as much me, because without the people, without the brothers, the brotherhood, it wouldn't have been a career whatsoever. There was never a day that I dreaded going to work. Now, there were some days you'd rather stay at home, holiday or birthday, or a little bit more tired, or didn't feel like going in. But I can say that it was never a job. It was a place to go in to serve, to make a difference in your community, to have fun, to train hard, to work hard, to learn more about yourself, to learn more about your community, and to be there with the brothers that you were with. That was not work. I think a successful firefighter, I think it's how you can be a successful is to have relationships. And the calls, the experiences, the training's going to be there. But if you don't let yourself develop relationships, and to have somebody that you know, hands down, that if you're in deep and you're not going to make it out by yourself, you've got a buddy there with you, or a crew with you, that's going to make sure that you all get out. And if you get low on air or run out of air, you've got a buddy there that you can buddy breathe with, and you can share their air to get you out. If you don't develop those relationships, you're missing it. Yeah, family and my faith played a big part. Actually, with my faith, I wish I would have been more, I think, forceful with my faith, but I think that's when kind of for some reason, I don't really know why, that being that tough guy that should never shed a tear, that tough guy that's got to lead, you know. But we prayed a lot at the dinner table, even over certain situations. There was times that we did pray, and having, you know, that faith and sharing that. By no means I wouldn't have made it through, you know, without the Lord and being such a huge part. Not perfect by no means. I grew up there too, and learned a lot along the ways. But I remember a certain prayer that I prayed, and it was every day. It was later on in my career as a captain or as a battalion chief, but I always prayed every shift going in that the Lord would enable me to make decisions based on safety so we could get back home, you know, the next day. So, golly, you know, that prayer was answered every day. And what a difference that made. And as far as family, Kathy, my wife, you know, after 35 years, both boys, Josh and Jesse, you know, they grew up. They were part of the fire department as well, getting together, having meals together, and playing, and being out behind Station 7, and the guys telling Josh to go out there and jump in the mud puddle and get himself all wet, and then you know, it'd get Josh in trouble. And just, yeah, big part of the Christmas parties, the get-togethers that we, you know, all had, and family was a huge, huge part about my career with the fire department. With Engine 8, I was a company officer, and I'll never forget, you know, it mashed a tip end of Mike's finger off, and is going to the hospital, you know, praying for him and for healing, but that's just what happened to just come to my mind for some reason. But if somebody was hurt or struggling, and you know, for sure we would get together and pray for that person and pray over that person. And in the heat of the moment, I knew the Lord had us, so it was just so many, and day in and day out. I was so fortunate to be assigned to very active companies, and you know, between 7 and 4 and 8, and just staying so active, and so many calls, and where things could have went wrong, could have went sideways, and just for sure knowing that the Lord was there with us, and He had our backs. Would I have done anything different? Golly, I'd like to do it all over again, Larry. I think that what I would have done differently was if I could have just slowed up a little bit. Yeah, I loved it. I enjoyed it. But if I could have just slowed up a little bit, you know, because it was always like, you know, firefighter 1, firefighter 2, driver or FEO, captain, battalion chief, always driving, going to all kinds of schools and doing all kinds of community interactions. And I wish I would have took a breath more and just slowed down and enjoyed the ride more, I guess, because it was like you was always pressing, pushing to better yourself, to make yourself promotable, and to keep moving. I was very fortunate. The years wasn't exact, but it was kind of like I drove for around 10 years. I was captain for around 10 years, and I ended up being BC for battalion chief for around 10 years. You know, not exactly, but it was close. So I had that balance, which I thought that was pretty cool, and it really helped me with my career, my learning. But to do anything different, I'd do it all the same way all over it again, and just awesome experience. I think my biggest advice to a rookie class, if I had the opportunity to tell them, would be to eat hot dogs on Saturday and watch Andy Griffith. And I wanted to just keep that in mind, because, you know, we looked at it, if we didn't eat hot dogs on Saturday for lunch, you couldn't go to church Sunday. You know, it wasn't allowed. So And, you know, every evening they're eating meals together. And, you know, we talked about the meals before, but, you know, if it wasn't a true firehouse, you know, if you didn't have Andy Griffith on, it wasn't a true firehouse. If you didn't eat hot dogs on Saturday, it's not a true firehouse, which we all did. We all did. But I would say also, you know, keep it on the lighter side. Enjoy each other, enjoy those relationships, and to train, and to train hard. If it wouldn't have been for some of our training experiences, because the way that I looked at it, training was, to me, in my eyes and my heart, was you trained hard, so whenever you needed to rely on that training, you didn't think, you reacted. And that reaction was your training. And because of that reaction, you know, firefighting, medical, it's all around time, that time value. And you stayed ahead of that time value by being able to react, you know, by training. And also to, you know, give back to the community and stay involved with the community. Be proud of what you're doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because there is a certain pride that you carry as a firefighter, because being on that red fire truck and being with those lights flashing, and there's nothing better than to be able to go home at the end of the shift feeling that you've done a good day's work. What I would want the fire department to remember about myself, I think the biggest thing that, and I failed at times, but I always wanted to treat the other one like I wanted to be treated. And I learned that through my dad, and which my dad was a big mentor in my life. And just treat people, wanted to treat people with kindness. And even though it was had to be harsh at times or hard at times, I just would want to be remembered as, you know, the firefighters came first, and I was a firefighter's officer, whether it was captain or a battalion chief, and that might have been questioned at times whenever you were trying to make a difference and holding people accountable. But that's what I would like people to remember, that I was there for them. I would like for my family to remember me as being a loving dad, a loving husband. You asked me earlier about what would I have changed, and I think that I was so committed and so devoted to the fire department. Wow, it took me 15 years to get my two-year degree in fire science because of going at night, but yet wanting to be with my family. But I felt like I cut my family short a little bit, because I always kept the fire department out, you know, because of going to school, because of working EMT at the Coliseum when we used to do that, because of about any time anybody asked to trade time or to work. Yeah, I'll work. I wanted to be at the fire station. I wanted to be with those guys. You know, I wanted to go have a good time. Vacation was too long to me, you know, back in the day. But I should have enjoyed my vacation more being with my family. Not saying that I didn't enjoy my family, because wow, we've done so much together, and they were such a big part of the fire department, big part of my life, that I would want my family to remember. But yes, I was that devoted firefighter, but I tried to balance it and failed at times, but that I was a family person as well. What I miss most at the GFD is conversation and talking, the brotherhood. There was really nothing that you didn't know what was going on within the city, that you wasn't aware of what was going on around your surroundings. But I miss that the most, is that station life, the station talk, and really appreciated knowing that you were there for each other. I know that's still there. The brotherhood is still there, but I guess I miss that daily conversations and being around each other. The value that I see in these interviews is just, I think you hear things that you had never heard before. You know, you think you know your brother, you think you know the people, and the few that I've listened to and the ones that, you know, you and I talked about, Larry, of not knowing, you know, some things that was going on with your brother's life or your buddy's life, or didn't know that, you know, even before coming on the fire department, the military that they were involved in, or the work that they were involved in. And just having this as a keepsake to go back, you know, because like you and I've kind of laughed about, our minds, our memories, not like they used to be, and to be able to recall. And so I think that even later on in the years, and I'm glad that we're doing this now so I can try to remember some of the stuff. You never know what's before us, but to be able to go back and to listen to is going to be a great value to this, and not only for me, but for my family. No, a special message, not really no individual, just let my brothers know I love them, miss them, appreciate them. I wish I could go back and recall everybody, but there's just no way to do it. I'd leave somebody out. But just that message that thanks for being the brothers that you are, and for it's all because of you that I had the career that I had. The only thing, Larry, that I can think of is 9/11, whenever that happened, where I was and what I was doing. I think that when 9/11 happened, I was at Station 8, and I was a captain at Station 8, and I was standing in Chief Spears. It was whenever the commanders, assistant chiefs, had their office at Station 8, and I was standing there in his office, and we were having a conversation, and his TV was on, and all of a sudden we saw this plane coming to one of the towers, and kind of looked at each other and said, "That's odd, is that real, or is that a show, or what's going on?" But I'll never forget that day of actually being on duty and seeing that happen. And once we figured out what was going on, it was a very helpless feeling that I think that come over me and come over several of us, because we felt like that we needed to be there, that we needed to be there to help. You know, we're the guys that are always running in, not running out. And so we felt the need to run in, and we couldn't because, you know, being away in New York. But somebody told me this, a couple of days later, dealing with that helplessness, that we had a job to do in Greensboro, and we needed to stay focused, and for sure keeping those families and the operation and all that was going on there in your prayers and in your thoughts. But we needed to stay focused because we needed to give the service to Greensboro and to be ready for that next call for us.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.